I wanted to bring up the topic of cancel culture and how
That's
that
what
is.
I was gonna say.
Oh, really?
That's what I was going to say.
Girl time. Yeah. Because it seems to have enveloped our nation just with the social justice issues, and just it's the trend right now.
Well, I was just gonna address describing what cancel culture is, right? So it seems like it happens mostly through social media. It's this removing of support from a person, usually someone of notoriety, or a business or a brand when they've done something that, a whole host of things, something that's negative or abusive or racist or seeing someone else as less than, anything that pulls them off the pedestal of this person is perfect and they can do everything right and they can't do anything wrong. And it typically comes with a lot of shame as it's super public and people behind the screen seem to have no problem going in really hard on what they've done and what we should do collectively together to make sure they, 1, never forget, 2, possibly never work again, 3, maybe never make any money again. So people pull their support vocally, and they also pull their support financially, but it usually comes with a lot of shame, which is my main issue with cancel culture, which is that we don't do that, right? Like, we don't want to see people in that space of, because of what you've done, you will never live this down. That will always be who you are. You should be highly ashamed for it, and you're going to suffer possibly for, forever, for as long as you can. And somehow I feel vindicated, or I feel better about it because you are now experiencing the shame from what you've done.
Yeah, I think maybe some of the reason why people are inclined to it is that there's an accountability for what you say. You got freedom of speech, but also you're not freedom of speech doesn't mean that you're free from consequences.
Yeah.
So if you say something ignorant, you say something racist, you say something homophobic, fill in the blank. I think the idea is you're free to say it, but I'm also free to not choose to frequent your business or fill in the blank.
So accountability, I think, is important. And that's something that we can all be a part of as far as saying, hey, this was done. Please take ownership for that and then choose to be a patron of them or not. But I think I do think there's a line where it crosses from, you know what, I just don't support what they do, or I'm not okay with what they've done or what they've said, and they're not taking accountability for it. And I'm going to, again, make them feel shame for what they've done as opposed to giving them space and room to do better.
Well, I was going to bring in the fact that ignorance is a part of this. And that, to me, is different than someone blatantly being racist and violating the law in our nation. So when that happens, there's a huge distinction for me, at least. And when that happens, violation of a law, what happened to George Floyd, there needs to be legal action taken. And that doesn't define the perpetrator and who he is. Because I believe that everyone is a child of God. He can receive forgiveness, he can be forgiven. But it's just when people are holding the same, what the perpetrator did to George Floyd to I said something ignorant and I'm going to cancel you forever. That's two different things, I think.
Cancel culture wasn't started because of the Me Too movement, but it definitely was fueled by
the Me Too
movement. So the Me Too movement was essentially started to bring awareness to women being assaulted, whether that be sexually, verbally, physically, whatever it is, on a irregular basis, and how the perpetrators largely just got away with it. I used to be dead set. And when I say dead set, I mean unmoving. You could not convince me. Once a man was accused of assaulting a woman, I didn't even need to see data. I didn't need any sort of proof. I didn't need a single receipt. If it was said, it was true, and I hated him. And so I had no issues, just canceling that person.
There's two categories that I think are that I'm seeing in this. One is there's the canceling of a person.
Yeah.
And then there's also canceling of businesses or corporations.
Right.
And that both are affected within cancel culture, if I'm not wrong.
No, yeah.
And I think that there are some people probably like me that would I support one versus the other. Then there's also categories of, or at least there needs to be a delineation between consequences for actions,
Right.
and I think this is kind of like what Emily was saying, like consequences for actions and just attributing actions to somebody's identity and saying that
Right.
this person, because they've done evil things, is evil to their core, and they are only capable of perpetuating evil, versus, they should at least face the consequences for the evil that they've done.
Right.
And I think that those are two delineations that are probably important to think through when we're talking about what we're going to cancel or what's being canceled or cancel culture in general.
So, to even provide a very controversial person in this kind of cancel, and rightfully so, should have been canceled personally, but Bill Cosby, right?
Okay.
Right? Bill Cosby, and we know what he did. But then you saw that there was a backlash against even the Cosby Show, and so where it was a very interesting kind of topic, especially within the African American community, is like, we don't support Bill Cosby and what he was doing and what he has done. But then you also have that the Cosby Show for African Americans, for us growing up, that was the very first time that we saw positive imagery of a successful black family in America. You had a doctor, and I believe his wife, Claire, was a lawyer, was an attorney. And so for that imagery on American television, for us, for Thursday night primetime TV, was a beautiful thing to see. And so once Bill Cosby and all the allegations came out, yes, rightfully so, we canceled Bill Cosby, the person. But then we canceled also the television show as well. But then to also add an additional layer on it, we as Christians, because all of us here, we all are believers, do we then hold then to cancel culture for even Bill Cosby himself, right? Mm-hmm. Do we not believe that he is also worthy of the gospel being presented to him? And so the cancel culture, in my mind, it's a dense topic, because there are layers to this. We cancel a corporation, we cancel people, we cancel television shows, but are all worthy of the gospel? Are corporations worthy of the gospel? Are corporations people? So, I mean, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but just understanding what cancel culture is, what is the driver of it, and should we as Christians be operating in cancel culture?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with cancel culture is it doesn't only affect the person who was canceled, like with the Bill Cosby thing, right? It's like it affected theoretically, like let's say it wasn't like an ancient TV program, but it's a present one. Like what's the one, the House of Cards guy? Like that guy got like canceled because of stuff, but like everyone else's careers who could have been like, maybe they did an excellent job at that season, that's never going to be seen. They put in all this time and energy, and their career could have been so much better as a result of it. But like canceling the show because of him actually affected the entire cast, the directors, all the people who invested in the show, things like that. And it's like that. I don't know. I guess that's the challenge of cancel culture, is that it hurts so many other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, I think that's one of the conflicts, is that people just be canceling people all the time. Like, oh, I don't like what you just did there. Bye. Like, and I want everyone to know it. It's tough. That I don't know who would be. Yeah, that's a good question.
So corporations, people, history. What do we?
I feel like we're getting closer with identifying that, like, if that thing or corporation or person is celebrating something that is anti-human, anti-love, there's a consensus at least, like, this cannot stand anymore. But as far as how many people need to be on the same page for it to be done, I'm not sure.
So for me to bring this around to, like, I mean, everything has its own nuances. But I mean, we're all Christians. The separation of the person from the thing is what happened at the cross. He became sin who knew no sin, so that we might become the righteousness of God. So now I am separated from my actions, so that I can, by faith, be made right with God and be seen as righteous, blameless, above reproach, holy, all the above. And that's what I think we as Christians have the opportunity to model in the world, is to separate people, help them to see themselves apart from what they've done, call sin by exactly what it is, call oppression by exactly what it is, call misogyny and homophobia and racism all for exactly what they are, and not prescribe them to the individual. But while still, and the example that I always bring up is like, if somebody steals from a store, then you have to suffer the consequences of it. But while I simultaneously tell you to either pay up or go to jail, I'm also going to tell you, you are not a thief and you're not the sum of your behavior. You are a good person and you just don't know it yet. And so you're not living according to it. And so, but when it comes to monuments and things, obviously they got their nuance. But I feel like as Christians, we always have to keep in mind the focal point of the gospel, which was God separating us from sin so that we could see ourselves finally the way that he has always created us to be.